I understand that I'm very possibly in the minority when I say this, but to this day, I consider The Last of Us Part 2 to be the greatest game that I've ever played. Hi, I'm Joel. Now tell me.
What is a clock? It's a clock. Yeah.
Naughty Dog is a game studio known best for creating iconic game series like Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, and Uncharted. So in 2011, when they announced that they had a new game coming out, people, funnily enough, thought it'd be shit. I was like fucking 10, so don't ask me why. Honestly, the only information I could find online about it was that people were upset that it wasn't an Uncharted 4 trailer, but you know what, fucking cry about it, pussy boy. As more trailers came out, hype grew for the game until it eventually released in 2013 on the PlayStation 3. From there, it was considered one of the greatest games of all time, with the original release and the remaster both taking up slots in the top 50 games of all time on Metacritic. I personally have played the game fully through dozens of times, and there was even one point where I would go home from school every single day and play the multiplayer with my friend. The Last of Us stars voice acting vets Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson playing Joel Miller and Ellie Williams respectively. The story follows a pretty generic zombie movie plot, but the real appeal and kicker is the world building and character development we get within this 15-hour experience. That said, there are a million and one things that go into telling this beautifully crafted story about our darling dad in denim, Joel Miller. With season 2 having just finished, I felt a desire to go back and look at The Last of Us Part 2 and rediscover all the reasons why I loved it in the first place. So much so that I got a tattoo for the game. Before I get into this, I feel the need to say, this is my opinion. I know I make a lot of jokes about I'm right, you're wrong, so like, shut up. But dude, Papa Zany, it's not that deep. I'm just fucking goofing off and have a grand old time. So, for the love of God, don't be weird. I'm down as fuck for a conversation, but not an argument. Please do not be mean to me, because I can and will send you a 10-minute video of me crying on Instagram. You don't want that. Either way, let's just sit back, relax, and have a calm discussion about why I consider The Last of Us Part 2 to be the greatest game that I've ever played.
Went out one night to make a little round. I met little Sadie and I shot her down. Went back home, jumped into bed, 44 pistol under my head.
To start off, I'm going to go through a quick summary of both games. Now keep in mind, this does not include the DLC. This summary was already kind of long as is. To be honest, it doesn't really do much for the entire overarching story, more so just world building. So yeah, if you want to skip the summary, please feel free to go to this timestamp. Obvious spoilers ahead. TTYL, I love you, bye. In 2013, the apocalypse comes in the form of a fungus that controls people's minds and makes them attack others to spread the infection. We follow Joel Miller, who, after the loss of his daughter, goes down a dark path of raiding, smuggling, and throwing bricks at people. All that changes one day when, in exchange for some guns, he offers to smuggle a 13-year-old immune girl to an outpost ran by a militia group called the Fireflies. When this falls through, his friend's dying wish is for him to take the girl to a hospital on the other side of the country in hopes of making a cure for the fungus. Over their journey, their bond starts to grow. She makes really bad jokes, he teaches her to throw bricks at people, and overall, it's a really cute story if you ignore the mysterious brick-related injuries. Their entire journey leads up to them making it to the hospital in Salt Lake City, where he discovers that to create a vaccine for the virus, she needs to die.
Wow. But it's a lucky thing I had my pieces.
Your pieces?
My guns.
Oh.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
Joel massacres the entire hospital, including the doctor that was going to perform the procedure, and takes Ellie out before she can wake up from sedation. When asked what happened, Joel lies and says that there was nothing that the doctor could do, so he just left. Naturally, Ellie didn't believe him because he's a really bad fucking liar. Over time, she grows to distrust and resent him until one day they reconnect. Now, because this is a video game, the very next day, he is killed by the daughter of the doctor that he killed at the hospital. Seeking revenge, Ellie goes to Seattle to search for the murderer and her friends. She spends 3 days using everything that she's learned from Joel, like torture, sneaking around patrols, and following in Joel's footsteps by throwing bricks at people. All of this culminates to Ellie realizing the evil shit that she's done in search of revenge. She decides to abandon her search. That is, until on the last night, Joel's murderer, Abby, discovers where Ellie is and goes to murder her and her friends for killing all of Abby's friends, and like, dude, it's a whole thing. At this point, we go back in time and follow Abby, who has gone on the run from her group to look for her friend who disappeared. In this journey, she meets 2 kids from an opposing faction, and their bond starts to grow while Abby protects these kids and care for them in a maternal way. Near the end of the story, she comes across her friends' dead bodies and a map left behind by Ellie, so she travels to where she's been staying, and dude, Abby beats the shit out of Ellie. But after some convincing from one of the kids, she decides to spare Ellie and her girlfriend. Cut to some time later, and now Ellie is living on a ranch with her girlfriend and her kid, and you can tell that she's very clearly traumatized by her past. That is when Ellie gets a tip off that Abby is currently in Santa Barbara, to which Ellie responds by saying she won't go. After finding a hostile group, Ellie discovers that Abby's being held captive by them. She goes to release her and convinces her to have one final fight. Ellie begins to win the fight until she has a flashback to her final moments that she shared with Joel, to which she decides to release Abby and spare her life. The two leave in separate directions, and Ellie returns to her home, which is now empty, showing that her girlfriend left her for choosing revenge and being a deadbeat dad. Lastly, the game ends with Ellie walking off in the distance, forever changed by her time spent chasing revenge. When the game first came out, we saw Joel get Negan'd by Tigress Woods. The audience was, as you could expect, very upset. I distinctly remember downloading the game as soon as it was available and playing it on drop day, even asking for the night off from work. So to go into it expecting another classic Ellie and Joel mess around and very quickly realizing that won't happen, it had me wondering, what could come next? I can't talk about this without mentioning the false advertisement scandal. From the release of the initial announcement trailer, people were theorizing that Joel was going to die in the game. This is because in the trailer, he's shown walking into a house from a doorway filled with blinding light. Due to the large amount of questions properly guessing what would happen, I feel like Naughty Dog knew that they had to do a bit of a course correction in the advertising to kind of put people off of the scent. From there, we saw multiple trailers showing him off using clips of flashbacks that were edited to make him look age corrected for the timeline of the game. There's even one scene where they replaced Jesse, another character, with Joel's player model in Seattle. This gave the audience a false sense of what to expect from the game. What could have been a return to form about Joel ended up being a story about Ellie and the levels of brutality that come out through her grief. Due to the false advertisements, I felt like I was kept on my toes throughout the entire game, and I knew that I shouldn't expect what I expected out of the story. I loved Joel as a character, and his loss truly was felt, but not in the way that some people online made it seem. Just because Joel is gone doesn't mean that the game automatically doesn't work. Part 1 works because of the dynamic that Joel and Ellie have and how their distaste for each other eventually grows into a love and respect similar to a father and a daughter. But the story they set out to tell for part 2 can only motivate players to complete it if something of that caliber happens. In a world where no good or bad deed goes unpunished, Joel had to die to get the ending he deserved after his years as a raider and now his massacre in Salt Lake, which damned humanity's only chance at a cure. And for something as simple as gameplay reasons, Joel had to die to give us, the player, the motivation to drive on for the story designed to be about revenge. We rooted for the two in part 1 because we enjoyed seeing their dynamic grow, but because part 2 is half about Ellie on a course for revenge purely for herself, we as an audience needed that motivation. After seeing Abby kill him, I genuinely wanted to kill her right then and there. When playing as Ellie, I could only view the enemies as a roadblock that needs to be moved in my journey to make Abby suffer for killing my dad. And yes, he's my dad, not yours. Get your own. Try to steal my dad, I'll show you, motherfucker. In the beginning, she's not necessarily shy when it comes to murder, but over time, she goes from doing clean shots to the head, to torture, to committing acts so evil that it would be a death sentence in the world of John Wick. As a whole, I'm sure that the decision to kill off Joel was not made lightly, but it serves a bigger purpose in driving Ellie in this journey. So much so to the point that he doesn't just haunt her narrative, but Abby's as well. Her friends constantly talk about the things that they've done, and it's very clear that their dynamic has permanently changed because of this course that Abby set them on. And as sad as it is, it gave Abby the closure she needed to grow into a better person, with it being my personal belief that she would have never saved Lev and Yara if it weren't for her experience in Jackson. Alright guys, it's time to talk about the suspiciously golf club-sized elephant in the room. As stated in other people's videos, The Last of Us Part 2 could be considered a double feature in terms of gameplay length. Unlike open world games, linear story-driven games are much shorter typically due to the fact that it lacks certain things like additional map markers and side quests to distract the player. Whereas the first game can be completed in about 15 hours, the second one has almost double that with 25 hours of expected playtime. A large part to play in that is the fact that we spend what is essentially an entire length of a game playing as Ellie, and then we rewind time after that on a cliffhanger and spend the rest of the game with Abby. save for the epilogue. A huge discourse we saw over the game stems from the decision to actively follow and play as this character that we spent so long heavy set on killing. There's a huge importance that this choice has. Abby's story loosely follows Joel's journey in the first game. We see someone who loses a person very close to them due to the violent nature that this post-apocalyptic world has. From that, they go down a darker path that leads them to dark corners, not just physically, but mentally as well. But in time, they find someone to fight for, someone that they can offer protection and guidance. In the end, they decide to sacrifice something huge in exchange for this person who is now like a child to them. For Joel, it comes through sacrificing the chance of a cure for Ellie, but for Abby, it's severing all ties from her entire faction due to the black and white viewpoint they have on the group that Lev originates from. In storytelling, a lot of writing can be boiled down to tension and release. So to write an entire story where you're following Ellie and you're finally face to face with this thing that you have been searching for the entire time, just to end it on a cliffhanger, it can come off easily as bad writing. There's no release of tension in the moment that would typically be considered the climax of the story, but here's why I think it's okay. One of my friends always tells me there's a 100% proper way of doing things in media. You can have what is considered perfect lighting, perfect camera settings, perfect sounding audio, but at the end of the day, everything is a tool. There may be, for creative reasons, a more effective way of telling the story that you intend to tell in a way that's non-traditional. A good example of this is a song that got popular on TikTok, Golden Hour by Jake. It can only technically be played on a piano that is tuned in a way that is non-traditional. And that's what I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 exactly is. It is tuned in a way that is non-traditional. By adding Abby's story into the game the way they did, it allows the players to connect to this character who traditionally would be very two-dimensional and allow us to fully invest into her and her motivations. By the end of day one, I was rooting for her. I wanted her to go save these kids and figure out what's going on. I began to sympathize with this character that at one point I wanted to beat to death with my bare hands. I went from killing all of her friends in horrible ways to seeing how their deaths affected the people around them. I got to talk to my friend's boyfriend who I stabbed in the neck, or chat about video games with this girl that I stabbed in the neck, or play catch with a dog that I stabbed in the neck. And then when the story finally culminated to the moment that I was waiting for in the theater, I was stuck at a crossroads. Adding this extra level to the game adds so much texture from a storytelling perspective. All of that tension lost from leaving us on a cliffhanger was not just retrieved again, but it was built back up tenfold. With all that said, I saw in an interview or a tweet a couple years ago that for the life of me, I cannot find again. It was with one of the game directors, and they said, if you are not open to liking Abby, then you will not like this game. And that is 100% true. If you go into Abby's section bitter, that's okay. It's expected. But if you play 12 hours as her and still find no redeeming qualities, or at the very least sympathize with her at least somewhat, then this just isn't the game for you, which is completely okay. But I did. So I did. You know? A big question can come up if you sit down and think about what this game is about. Is violence a part of human nature? What happens when someone wrongs you so egregiously that you see no other way of mitigating the situation other than spreading pain to them? Is it then okay to act on your feelings? The Last of Us Part 2 intends on telling us a story about the cycle of violence and how it can not only affect yourself, but the people around you. The bare bones cycle in the game can be reduced to this. Marlene and Jerry plan on sacrificing Ellie to create a vaccine for the virus, to which Joel responds by killing Jerry and the other Fireflies in the hospital. Abby, in the grief of losing her father Jerry, searches for Joel and kills him. Ellie, in the grief of losing her found father Joel, searches for Abby and kills all her friends. Abby finds her friends dead and searches for Ellie, kills Jesse, and permanently injures Tommy. Tommy finds out where Abby is, and Ellie goes to kill her until she eventually decides to break the cycle and move on with her life. The cycle of violence in this game is a simple call and response. None of this would have happened if Abby didn't kill Joel, or Joel didn't kill Jerry, or Jerry decided to not sacrifice Ellie in exchange for a cure. To be on the internet in the time of this game's release was a fucking disaster. If you had any positive thing to say about the game, you would be met with a barrage of hate comments coming from all depths of the internet. This, however, paled in comparison to the backlash faced by Laura Bailey and Jocelyn Mettler, the voice and face of Abby, respectively. In April of 2020, 2 months before release, a large amount of the plot for the game is leaked, and within the week before release, the first 3 hours of gameplay and ending is leaked as well. This was met with a lot of skepticism. Even so, it still lit the entire community on fire. Without getting the opportunity to even play the game, fans heard key points like Joel dying, Ellie and him being estranged, and even the fact that Ellie doesn't kill Abby in the end. In anger, a wave of hate was spread online to the developers and cast of the game. The formerly mentioned Laura Bailey even received death threats directed at her newborn son. Neil Druckmann, one of the game directors, even had a rumor being spread from a source inside Naughty Dog that he dressed up in a mocap suit so he could film the sex scene with Abby's actress. But that was only the start. Gamers as a community are infamous for being very intolerant of the LGBTQ and feminist communities. When they found out that you play as not just one, but two women in the game, they went fucking feral. One of the rumors going around at the time was that you were playing as a trans person because Abby is muscular. Her storyline also received even more hate because the fact that she's protecting a child who is outcast from their community due to them actually being trans. This snowballed into a group of people who hated the game because they felt like they were pandering to an audience of people from the LGBTQ and feminist communities due to the fact that it stars two capable women, has a lesbian, a bisexual, and a transsexual. But so fucking what? The Bechdel test is a way to check for proper female representation in media. The way that something passes is if you have two named female characters on screen having a conversation about something other than a man. That said, if you use a different lens, I feel it can be used for other underrepresented communities in media. The way to do this is pretty simple. Writing fleshed out characters of varying race, sexualities, and gender identities without relying on stereotypes. Lev, a transsexual, was outcast from his community, but throughout the story you see him fight with the ideologies he grew up with. He is hated by his people for who he is at the core, but at the end of the day is still drawn back to his mother, who continues to reject him. Abby, a woman in grief after the loss of her father, decides to channel her energy into exercise, and she's gotten to the point where she is more muscularly defined and strong than most grown men that I know. Pandering to an audience requires a level of care to not be put in, but it's very clear that these are very in-depth and well fleshed out characters that don't rely on the traditional stories you would expect to see from a grieving woman or a transsexual in media. Ellie is a character who just so happens to be gay. If you remove all romance from the game, then you still have Ellie and Dina and Abby. These are characters with goals and needs and hobbies completely separate from their sexuality, because that's how it is in real life. You are not just gay, you are not just trans, and you are not just a woman. You are everything. But all of that is to say, at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Gamers were presented with a topic that they didn't like, and because of that, they spread hate. The game presented them with the death of a favored character, and because of that, they spread hate, death threats, rumors that could have ended careers. The cycle of violence lived on, not just in the game, but in real life. At this point of the video, I don't feel like the question is whether the characters were justified or not, because undoubtedly they weren't. The question that we should be asking is, why do we need the story that, for some people, felt like it was drilling this idea in their head that violence is bad? Because after the fact, it's very evident that they didn't know it, or at the very least, they didn't respect it. If you listen to the story and try to learn about tolerance, you would understand that the death threats and evil things that were said to the devs and the cast did nothing but spread pain. It didn't help you feel better, it only made them feel worse for doing their fucking job. And more importantly, it permanently put a stain on your character. You are that kind of person. To Abby, Ellie and Joel are the bad guys. To Ellie, Abby and the WLF are bad guys. But to the people that were harassed for doing their job and creating a video game, you are the bad guy. Everybody is the protagonist in their own story, so we all find somebody to be our bad guy. I feel like Ellie and Abby would have been really good friends, but that's not the world that they lived in. To write a story that so effectively highlights the world that we're in and the things that we do in response to it spoke to me. To see the effects that it had on people, whether it's positive or negative, speaks to the ability of media to truly touch people's hearts. The Last of Us Part 2 is my favorite game of all time because it told the story that it wanted to tell with no care or regard for being nice. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's real, as seen by the bullheaded hate and unapologetic love that we've seen from the haters and fans, respectively. There's an article on AmericanScientist.org by Pat Lee Shipman talking about the inherent violent nature of humans. He goes on to speak about the fact that our ancestors, being primates, were seen as prey, not predators. But as time moved on, our minds morphed, we became more intelligent, and we were able to dominate those who were once our predators. Eventually, agriculture was founded, and we were tied to the land. So the idea of violence and war to protect or conquer more land was planted in our heads and lasted there for thousands of years. So the question I asked earlier, is violence a part of human nature? He had this to say: the violence and exclusiveness lie so deeply in our biological heritage, intertwined with the nurturing concepts of kin and affiliation, home and neighbor, is a grim thought. Humans have been fighting and killing other humans for years and years and years. Over time, we have shifted the identity of those for whom we fight. It is no longer simply kinfolk or immediate neighbors. It is vast groups like those who proclaim themselves citizens of this thing we call a nation, or those who follow the practices of this holy man. Perhaps we can shift the identity of us still further, extend the boundaries still more widely until there is no longer a them to fight, but only an us who must survive together or not at all. If violence is in our nature, as it seems to be, there is no other hope. I remember some relevant words from the classic movie The African Queen. They were spoken by Katharine Hepburn, who played a missionary spinster, Rosie, to Humphrey Bogart's ragtag steamboat captain, Mr. Allnut. Sitting with her spine straight and proud, her expression resolute, and without lifting her eyes from her devotional reading, Hepburn proclaimed, "Nature, Mr. Allnut, is what we are put in this world to rise above."